The greatest distance between two generations isn't time. It's the silence that grows when no one listens. Intro: The Three Golden Principles. Our grandparents used to raise children. We live in a time of endless parenting books, online advice, and expert interviews. But sometimes all that noise still leaves us confused, frustrated, and even a little lost. Why? Because what we've gained in information, we may have lost in wisdom. There was a time not so long ago when families raised children without modern psychology degrees, self-help podcasts, or child-rearing strategies. And yet, children were respectful. Homes had order, and parents, despite their flaws, were honored. What was their secret? It wasn't perfection, it wasn't control. It was a simple but powerful approach to parenting built on values, character, and example. Our grandparents didn't manage children, they shaped them. Not through rewards or punishments alone, but through presence, through expectations, through three timeless principles that even today could change the tone of a home. But here's the thing: most of us have forgotten what those principles even are. Not because we rejected them. No, most of us never learned them in the first place. So let me ask you something. Have you ever found yourself in a room with your own children or grandchildren and felt invisible? Have you ever wanted to correct or guide but bit your tongue because you didn't want to interfere? Do you ever wonder why kids today seem more anxious, more entitled, less grounded, despite all the tools we now have? The answers may not lie in new discoveries, but in old wisdom. Today we're not going back in time. We're going back to truths that transcend time. Because the way our grandparents raised their children wasn't perfect, but it worked. It produced adults who took responsibility, respected boundaries, and knew the meaning of sacrifice. So if you've ever looked at the modern world and felt something is missing in the way we raise our kids, if you've ever thought to yourself, maybe we're overcomplicating things, then this message is for you. Because these three golden principles our elders lived by might just be the clearest, strongest answer we still have. Not just for raising children, but for healing families. Before we begin, let me say this. This isn't about criticizing today's parents. It's about offering something solid, something rooted, something real. And if what you hear today resonates with something deep in you, something familiar, something you've long missed, then do me a small favor. Like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone you care about. Not for me, but because some truths deserve to be remembered and passed on. Now, let's step into the first principle. One that doesn't begin with rules or lectures, but with the example we live every day. Children have never been very good at listening to their elders, but they have never failed to imitate them. James Baldwin. The first principle: led by example, not just words. The first golden principle our grandparents lived by was this: live the lesson before you teach it. It sounds simple, but in practice it was the foundation of every household rule, every expectation, every standard of behavior. It wasn't enough to tell a child to be respectful, you had to show them what respect looked like. Every single day. The disconnect in modern parenting. In today's world, many parents and grandparents feel a quiet frustration. I tell them not to shout, but they raise their voice anyway. I teach them to be responsible, but they keep blaming others. I try to correct their attitude, but it only leads to conflict. Here's a hard truth: children don't follow advice. They follow example. They always have. They always will. You can preach patience, but if your tone is short, your actions cancel your words. You can demand gratitude, but if you complain constantly, your words ring hollow. You can insist on respect, but if you belittle others or dismiss their feelings, you've already taught your child something very different. Our grandparents understood this almost instinctively. They knew their children were always watching, and so whether they were aware of it or not, they taught through presence more than through preaching. The power of silent teaching. Think about the way a grandfather would rise early, shave, dress neatly, and greet each day with discipline, even when there was no one to impress. Or how a grandmother would lay the table with care, give thanks before a simple meal, and insist that everyone wait until the last person was served. These weren't just rituals, they were lessons: discipline, respect, gratitude. Order. Generosity. No lectures, no yelling, just quiet, repeated actions that shape the values of the next generation. And here's what's powerful. These lessons stuck. Even decades later, many adults still say, "That's how my grandmother used to do it," or "My father would never allow that kind of talk in his house." That's legacy. Why the principle still works today. Some might argue times have changed. Kids are different now. Yes, technology has changed. Schools have changed. Society has changed. But the human heart has not. Children are still learning what matters by watching how the people they love behave when no one's watching them back. That's why this principle remains as relevant as ever, perhaps even more so in a distracted world full of contradictions. If a parent scrolls on their phone all dinner but tells their child to have better focus, it won't work. If a grandparent criticizes disrespect but often gossips about others, it sends the wrong message. If a father says family comes first but never shows up on time, the words lose weight. Children don't need perfect role models. They need consistent ones. People who may stumble but own their mistakes. Who practice what they preach even when it's hard. Who model forgiveness, humility, and kindness not just in public, but at home. What you can do today. So what does leading by example look like in today's home? Speak gently, even when you're angry. That doesn't mean suppressing emotion but channeling it with maturity. Show children how to express frustration without disrespect. Apologize when you're wrong. There is no greater act of strength than a parent saying, "I was too harsh earlier. I'm sorry." Children learn grace not when they're forgiven, but when they see adults admit fault. Follow through on promises, big or small. Whether it's helping with homework, being on time for a school event, or simply listening when they need you, your consistency becomes their compass. Honor your own elders. Call your parents. Speak well of them. Share stories about the sacrifices they made. When kids see us respecting the past, they begin to value their own roots. Model balance. Don't just tell them to get off screens, invite them for a walk. Show them that life outside of devices is full, rich, and worth being present for. Quiet influence is the strongest kind. You may not see the results immediately. You may not hear your children or grandchildren thank you for setting an example. But they notice. They absorb. They carry it forward, even if they don't realize it until they become parents themselves. And when they do, they'll reach for the habits, the tone, the strength they once saw in you. That's what our grandparents understood so well. You don't teach values by talking about them. You teach values by living them until they become the air your children breathe. If you want to raise strong, kind, responsible children, become someone worth imitating. The second principle, discipline, is a form of love, not control. Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. Abraham Lincoln. When we think of discipline today, the word often carries baggage. Strictness, punishment, conflict. But for our grandparents, discipline wasn't about control, it was about care. It wasn't about enforcing power. It was about forming character. And deep down, every child understood they correct me because they care what discipline meant to them. Let's be clear. Our grandparents weren't perfect. Some were too harsh, others too silent. But in many homes across America, particularly in working class and rural families, discipline was not synonymous with fear. It was rooted in expectation structure and consequence. The family wasn't run like a democracy, but it wasn't a dictatorship either. It was a space where boundaries existed for the benefit of the child, not the ego of the parent. There were rules. Be home before dark. Say please and thank you. Finish your chores before play. And if those rules were broken, there were consequences, not punishments. Not humiliation, not shouting for show. Just calm, firm correction and sometimes silence so heavy it taught more than words ever could. What's different today? Modern parenting often swings between two extremes. Too soft, afraid to say no, constantly negotiating. Too reactive, yelling out of frustration, not principle. Neither works. In soft homes, kids feel lost, craving boundaries even as they push them. In reactive homes, kids learn to perform or rebel, but not to reflect. What's missing in both the middle ground our elders understood? Discipline is not something you do to your child, it's something you do for them. Why children actually crave discipline. Children may argue. They may slam doors or roll eyes, but deep inside, they are testing. Will you still guide me even when I fight you? Do your words mean something, or will you back down when I push? And the truth is, when parents don't stand their ground, kids don't feel free, they feel unsafe. Discipline teaches them that actions have consequences, that someone is watching and someone cares, that freedom must be earned, not assumed. Our grandparents didn't give kids every choice. They gave them structure so they could grow strong enough to make the right choices later. The essentials of loving discipline. So how did they get it right? They were consistent. You didn't get away with something today just because it was Sunday. Rules didn't shift with mood. That stability gave kids a sense of security, not restriction. They followed through. A warning wasn't an empty threat. If they said there'd be no dessert if homework wasn't done, there wasn't. They didn't yell, they acted. They were calm. Most discipline happened without theatrics. A look, a pause, a short conversation. The strength wasn't in volume, it was in conviction. They separated behavior from identity. That was a bad choice, not, "You're a bad kid." They corrected action without attacking worth. They taught, not just punished. Every correction had a purpose to raise a child who could self-correct one day. The role of boundaries. One of the greatest gifts we can give our children is the ability to tell themselves no. Not because someone is watching, not because they're afraid, but because they've developed inner restraint. That begins with external structure. It's like scaffolding for a building. Eventually, the structure comes down, but only after the foundation is strong. Our grandparents used clear boundaries to build that foundation. They didn't explain every rule. They didn't apologize for being the parent. They held the line, because they loved their children too much to let them raise themselves. What this looks like today. In a modern home, loving discipline might look like removing privileges when responsibilities are ignored, not out of anger but clarity. Saying no and meaning it not with shame but strength. Enforcing bedtime not for control but because rest matters. Holding kids accountable for their words, not to punish but to cultivate truth and kindness. You're not being mean. You're being the adult. And in a world full of weak boundaries that's more radical and more loving than ever, when you correct a child in love, you build a future adult who can correct themselves in wisdom. Discipline isn't easy. It costs time, energy, and sometimes tears. But it pays dividends that last for generations. Our grandparents knew. If you don't teach a child limits at home, the world will teach them the hard way. And by then, it may be too late. The third principle. Honor builds identity. If you want a child to grow strong, don't just teach them rules. Teach them who they are. When our grandparents raised children, they didn't just enforce good behavior. They raised young people who knew who they were, where they came from, who they belonged to, and what it meant to carry a family name. That's because they understood something powerful. Honor is not just a social gesture. It's a psychological anchor. In homes of the past, children weren't simply told what to do. They were reminded who they were and why that mattered. You're a Mitchell? Act like it. If you grew up in mid-20th century America, you probably heard something like this at least once. We don't act that way in this family. That's not how I raised you. Remember who you are. These phrases weren't manipulative. They were grounding. Because children weren't being shamed, they were being tethered to something larger than themselves. A story, a legacy, a name that meant something. That's what honor does. It gives a child a role to play in something bigger. The crisis of identity today. Today we live in a world obsessed with individualism. Be your own person. Find your truth. Reinvent yourself. There's beauty in that. But there's also danger, because in the rush to celebrate independence, we've unrooted identity. Children grow up with freedom, but no frame. They're told to express themselves, but no one helps shape who that self is. They're told to chase dreams, but not taught how to endure hard days. They're encouraged to stand out, but not grounded in where they come from. What's left is a generation that may be smart, talented, and free, but also anxious, lonely, and lost. Why? Because identity can't be invented. It must be inherited, shaped, and earned over time in community through connection. What our grandparents got right. In many traditional American households across cultures and backgrounds, honor was the thread that tied generations together. Kids were taught to stand when an elder walked in the room. Boys were told to shake hands with eye contact. Girls were taught that modesty was not weakness but dignity. Family names were spoken with pride, not as a burden, but as a responsibility. When a child messed up, it wasn't just about consequences. It was about the impact on the family. You carry our name. What you do reflects on all of us. This didn't crush identity, it shaped it. Because instead of leaving kids to figure out everything alone, it gave them a sense of belonging, a place, a legacy to live into, the link between honor and confidence. Here's the surprising truth. Honor isn't about pride. It's about stability. Children who are raised to honor something outside themselves. Elders' tradition values grow up with a stronger inner compass. They know life isn't just about them. Words matter. Actions carry weight. They come from something worth protecting. That's the root of healthy confidence. Not empty self-esteem, but earned self-respect. Our grandparents taught that a child's identity was built brick by brick through reverence, not entitlement. What this looks like today, reclaiming honor in a modern family, doesn't mean being old-fashioned or rigid. It means being intentional. Teach family stories. Share the sacrifices made by previous generations. Talk about the hard work that built the life they now live. Let them see themselves as part of something enduring. Use names with purpose. You are my son. That means something. Your last name carries history. Wear it well. Uphold sacred moments. Meals without screens. Standing for guests. Handwritten thank you notes. These small acts teach reverence. Honor your own parents in front of them. Let children hear you say, I learned this from your grandmother. That's not just respect, that's inheritance. Correct behavior with identity in mind. Instead of stop being bad, say, this isn't who we are. We treat people with kindness in this family. You're not just correcting them. You're reminding them of their place in something good and noble, reflecting honor in ourselves. Children will never learn to honor others if we as adults do not model it first. Do we speak with respect even when we disagree? Do we honor our word even when it's inconvenient? Do we hold space for silence, listening, and gratitude, or do we rush past them? Because here's the truth. Children do not learn honor through lectures. They learn it by watching how we treat the things we claim to value. If we want children to walk with dignity, we must walk that way first. Give a child a sense of honor and you give them an anchor they'll never outgrow. When we raise children to honor family elders, God truth, they do not become weaker. They become rooted. And in a world trying to blow them every which way, that rootedness may be the very thing that saves them. What we lost and what we can reclaim. Tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the preservation of fire. Gustav Mahler. We've walked through 3 golden principles that shape generations of strong, respectful, and grounded people. Lead by example because children imitate character, not commands. Discipline with love because boundaries create safety, not suffocation. Honor as identity because knowing where you come from helps you decide where you're going. And yet somewhere along the way something changed. Not overnight, not with a single event. But quietly, slowly, values that once held families together began to slip. What exactly did we lose? We didn't just lose customs, we lost clarity. Where once there were clearly defined roles, expectations, and shared meaning, we now have blurred lines, emotional distance, and unspoken frustration. Where once children looked up, now they often look around to peers' devices, celebrities. Where once elders guided, now they feel sidelined. Where once discipline was respected, now it's questioned, debated, or feared. But most of all, we lost the courage to lead with conviction. We became so afraid of being too strict, too traditional, too outdated, that we stopped doing the very things that gave our children security, stability, and self-worth. And the cost. We see it every day. Kids who feel lost in their own homes. Parents who feel powerless in their own roles. Elders who feel invisible in their own families. How did we get here? Some will blame the culture. Others will point to technology, schools, media, politics. But maybe, just maybe, we stopped believing in our own authority. Not the authority to control, but the authority to guide. Not the authority to demand perfection, but the authority to set the tone of a home. Our grandparents didn't ask the world to raise their children. They took that burden and that privilege upon themselves. They weren't perfect, but they were present. They weren't experts, but they were anchored in values deeper than trends. A message to modern parents and grandparents. Let's be honest, the modern world doesn't make parenting easier. It pulls at your time. It attacks your values. It questions your every move. You're told, don't discipline too much. Don't be too soft. Let them express themselves. Don't correct them too harshly, but don't let them run wild either. It's exhausting. But here's your reminder. You are not powerless. You are the leader of your home. And the moment you reclaim that role, not with anger but with quiet strength, your children will feel it. They won't always like it. They won't always show gratitude. But they will feel safer. They will grow stronger. Because whether they say it or not, they crave the same things generations before them craved. Structure, respect, belonging, purpose, someone who loves them enough to say no. What can we reclaim today? The good news is, it's not too late. Tradition doesn't die. It sleeps in silence, waiting to be reawakened. So how do we reclaim what matters? Start small. One quiet dinner without phones, one respectful correction without shouting, one moment of eye contact that says, I see you. Speak the values aloud. Don't assume your kids know what you stand for. Say it. Repeat it. Make it visible. Make it consistent. Reconnect the generations. Ask your parents to tell stories. Invite your children to listen. Let them see that family didn't begin with them, and it won't end with them either. Build household culture. Every home has a culture. Define yours. Maybe it's kindness. Maybe it's service. Maybe it's faith. But whatever it is, make it clear and live it. Remember that love includes leadership. Love without guidance is sentiment. Love with guidance becomes legacy. The fire is still there. You don't need to raise perfect children. You just need to raise anchored ones. Kids who know where the boundaries are, why character matters. That discipline is a form of love, not rejection. That honor is not outdated, it's empowering. And that their parents, even in a chaotic world, are willing to stand firm. Because when a child knows you will not abandon your principles, no matter what, they begin to trust that they are not alone in life. That is the essence of family. Not rules, not lectures, but the repetition of truth day after day until it becomes part of who they are. We don't need to reinvent parenting. We need to remember it. And remembering doesn't mean going backward. It means going deeper. Let us not bury the fire of our elders. Let us tend to it, so that one day when our children become parents themselves, they will pass that same fire on. Why modern homes feel disconnected and how to rebuild real connection. You can live under the same roof, share the same meals, even sit on the same couch and still feel like strangers. For all the comfort and convenience we have today, climate control, smart TVs, meal delivery, FaceTime, we're more disconnected in our homes than we've ever been. We talk but don't hear. We hear but don't listen. We share a house but not always a home. How did we get here? And more importantly, how do we find our way back? The illusion of togetherness. Modern life fools us into thinking we're connected. We can text our kids from another room. We can track their phones, know what time they got home, and see what they're watching on YouTube. But here's the truth. Knowing their location is not the same as knowing their heart. Sharing a meal is not the same as sharing a moment. Some families live under one roof like they're on different islands. Everyone eats on their own schedule. Earbuds are in during dinner. Screens glow in every room every hour. Conversations get replaced with scrolling and silence becomes the default. No arguments, no yelling, just a quiet drift. The emotional cost. And here's what happens over time. Children stop opening up. Spouses stop checking in. Grandparents stop offering input, afraid of interfering. Parents start feeling invisible, unheard, or worse, irrelevant. And slowly, everyone in the family begins to self-isolate even if they're never physically alone. That's the new epidemic in modern homes: emotional absence in the presence of others. Why this disconnect happens. It's not because we don't care. It's because we've stopped protecting connection the way our grandparents once did. See, in older generations, dinner was sacred time. Eye contact was expected. Letters were handwritten. Time wasn't just spent, it was shared. Evenings weren't for escaping the day, they were for processing it together. Today, the noise never stops. Our attention is pulled in 100 directions, and without realizing it, we begin living like roommates, not family. What real connection looks like. Real connection is intentional. It doesn't happen by accident. It has to be built like a fire that needs constant tending, and you don't need anything fancy to rebuild it. You don't need family therapy, new technology, or weekend retreats. You just need a willing heart and a few quiet habits that say, "I'm here, I see you, and I care enough to stop and listen." Here's what it looks like in a home. Uninterrupted time. Not hours, just 10 focused minutes. No phone in hand, no multitasking, just presence. Shared rituals. A meal, a walk, reading together, evening prayer. Something that repeats, that grounds everyone in the rhythm of the family. Open questions. Not, "How was your day?" but "What made you smile today?" Or "Was there anything that made you feel small or ignored?" Listening without fixing. Sometimes the best response isn't advice, it's understanding. Just say, "That sounds hard. I'm glad you told me." Apologizing when you get it wrong. Connection isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. Owning our mistakes invites others to do the same. Are you the connector in your home? Every home has one person who sets the emotional tone. Maybe it's you. And if you're reading this, maybe that's not by accident. You don't need everyone on board right away. Start small, lead quietly, be consistent. Connection is contagious, but someone has to go first. And if you're older, maybe a grandparent, you may feel tempted to say, "It's not my place anymore." But that's not true. Your wisdom, your patience, your gentle presence may be exactly what your family needs to reconnect. Don't underestimate the power of the still voice in the corner of the room. Rebuilding connection. One choice at a time. Let me be clear, you can rebuild a disconnected home. But it doesn't start with grand speeches or new rules. It starts with one act of sacred attention. Putting your phone down, turning the TV off, looking your child in the eye and saying, "Tell me what you're carrying today." Hugging your spouse before the day begins and meaning it. Calling your own parents just to say thank you. These moments don't just create connection. They heal what has been lost. The opposite of loneliness is not company, it's communion. What our homes need isn't more noise, it's more presence, more patience, more moments where love is made visible in silent service and eye contact. Because at the end of the day, what our children will remember isn't the things we bought them, the shows we watched, or the cars we drove. They'll remember how it felt to be in our presence. Make that memory worth holding on to. The role of elders, why every home needs a wise voice again. When an old person dies, a library burns to the ground. African proverb. In every thriving culture, one truth has always held: the elders are the soul of the family. Not because they control, command, or correct, but because they carry the memory, the perspective, and the grace that time alone can give. And yet, in many modern homes, something precious has been lost. The voice of the elder, once central, is now often quiet, not because it has nothing to say, but because no one stops to listen. A shift we barely noticed. It didn't happen overnight. The change came gradually, wrapped in the language of progress. Families got smaller, careers got busier, technology got faster, and slowly the rhythms of home left less room for reflection. Conversations that once happened on the porch or around a shared table are now replaced with scrolling, streaming, and passing one another in silence. And in the middle of it all, elders once honored now often feel like background characters in their own families' lives. Not needed, not consulted, not heard. Why this silence matters. When we lose the voice of the elder, we lose memory, the stories that tell us who we are, wisdom, the insight that helps us avoid the same mistakes, patience, the calm that balances youthful urgency, perspective, the understanding that life unfolds in seasons, not sprints. Elders carry a different kind of knowing. They've watched years pass, seen trends come and go, and witnessed the cost of choices made in haste. That kind of clarity doesn't shout. It whispers. But in a world too loud, whispers are often missed. And so the next generation walks forward without a compass because the one holding it was never asked to speak. Why elders often withdraw. Here's the sad part. Most elders don't stop offering wisdom because they don't care. They stop because they feel dismissed. They've been told. That's old-fashioned. You wouldn't understand. Things are different now, and maybe they are. But human nature hasn't changed. Family dynamics haven't changed. The ache to belong, to be seen, to be guided, that has never changed. So elders sit quietly. They swallow their stories. And families slowly lose their memory, their rhythm, their spiritual North Star. What homes look like with a wise elder. Present. Homes where elders are respected feel different. Not stricter, but safer. Not outdated, but anchored. In those homes, children learn that age is not a weakness, it's a badge of survival. That slowness can be sacred. That the best advice doesn't come from a search engine, but from someone who's lived through what you're afraid of. When a wise voice is honored, arguments de-escalate faster. Decisions are more thoughtful. Traditions are kept alive not out of duty, but gratitude. Elders remind us of the long view. They help us pause. They help us zoom out. And in doing so, they help us become more human. How to bring elders back to the center. We can't rewind time, but we can reposition the role of elders with intention. Here's how. Invite their voice. Ask questions about childhood, marriage, regrets. Wisdom comes when it's welcomed. Give them a place, a chair in the kitchen, a seat at the table. Let them be in the middle, not the margins. Honor their legacy. Celebrate anniversaries. Tell their stories to the kids. Make their sacrifices visible. Slow down for them. Their pace may be slower, but their presence brings balance. Learn to match their rhythm sometimes. Let them bless. Ask for advice, yes, but also let them speak encouragement, truth, or even just a prayer over the family. That kind of blessing echoes for generations. If you are the elder reading this, you are not invisible. You are not outdated. You are not done. Your family may not always say it, but they need you. They need your stories, your patience, your watchful heart. You are the guardian of memory, the quiet protector of the flame. And when you speak, whether in words or simply in how you carry yourself, you invite the home to become a sacred place again. Do not shrink. Stand tall in your gentleness. Be the stillness in the storm. A family without the wisdom of its elders is like a tree without deep roots, easy to bend, easy to break. We need your presence, not to control, but to calm, not to command, but to counsel, not to fix everything, but to remind us what matters most. How to pass down values in a noisy world. Children may forget what you say, but they never forget what you live. We are raising families, parenting, grandparenting, mentoring in a time of noise without depth. Everyone's talking. Few are listening. The world is louder than ever. And values, they get buried. Our grandparents passed on values not with megaphones, but with a slow, steady rhythm of life. Today, that rhythm has been replaced with scrolling headlines, distractions, and disconnection. And yet values still matter, maybe now more than ever. So how do we pass them on in a world that seems to forget them every 5 minutes? We don't shout louder, we plant deeper. The challenge of modern influence. Let's be honest, today's children are not just learning from their parents. They are being raised often unintentionally by algorithms, influencers, viral trends, entertainment, peers online who don't even know their last name. These voices shape how they think about identity, respect authority, success, even right and wrong, and often our values feel drowned out. But here's the truth. You don't need to be the loudest voice in their life. You need to be the most consistent one. Because the world is full of waves, but you can be the anchor, the quiet strength of lived values. You don't pass on values by telling children what to believe. You pass them on by letting them watch you believe in something real. If you want them to respect others, show respect, especially when it's difficult. If you want them to tell the truth, speak honestly, even when a lie would be easier. If you want them to love family, make time for it even when life gets busy. If you want them to value faith, humility, kindness, gratitude, live it out with quiet conviction. Because here's something you can trust. What they see in your habits, your tone, your choices, they absorb. Even if they pretend not to care, they're always watching. And what you consistently model becomes the soil their conscience grows in. From performance to presence. We sometimes think we need grand gestures to make a difference. We don't. In fact, the most powerful values are passed on in the in-between moments. The way you handle disappointment, the silence after an argument, the prayer whispered before dinner, the kindness shown to a stranger, the forgiveness offered when no one asks for it. These moments carry more weight than any lecture because they come from a life that believes what it says. Children grow up knowing what's real even if they can't explain it yet. They can spot hypocrisy. They can feel authenticity. Give them the kind of presence that whispers, "This is what goodness looks like when no one's watching." 5 ways to pass down values. Even when the world pushes back, here's how to quietly, intentionally plant values that outlast the noise. Make your values visible. Whether it's through routines, prayer conversations, or even a family motto, let what matters to you be known. Explain the why, not just the rule. Kids don't need more commands, they need understanding. Help them see the heart behind your decisions. Talk about your own mistakes. Tell stories of how you learned through failure, humility, and growth. This teaches honesty and resilience. Protect sacred time. Weekly family dinners, bedtime talks, morning quiet time. Even 10 minutes a day of undistracted connection makes values stick. Live with integrity when it costs something. It's easy to stand for what's right when there's no risk. Show your family what it means to hold your values when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. That's when it becomes real. Values take time to grow. Don't panic if your children push back. Don't give up if your grandchildren roll their eyes. That's normal. But don't stop planting, because values are like seeds. They don't grow overnight. Sometimes they sleep for years until life waters them. And then what you planted in quiet love will bloom in their time of need. They'll remember your calm voice in chaos, your patience in pain, your integrity when no one was looking, and that memory will become a guidepost. You may not see the harvest, but you can trust the seeds. The best sermons are lived, not preached. The world may not slow down, the noise may not fade, but your home, your life, your example can be a place of stillness, a place where children learn. This is what love looks like. This is what truth sounds like. This is what it means to live with honor. They won't remember every rule, but they'll never forget how it felt to be raised by someone who stood for something gently, faithfully, and without apology. Building a legacy that outlives you. Your greatest contribution to this world may not be something you do, but someone you raise. We spend our lives building a home, a career, a name. But in the end, none of it matters more than this: what we leave behind in the hearts of those who knew us. Not our wealth, not our opinions, not even our accomplishments, but our character, our values, our love quietly poured out in 100 unnoticed moments. That is legacy, and it's the only thing that truly lasts. What is a legacy? Really, legacy is not about fame. It's not about making sure people remember your name. Legacy is about what lives on in others because of you. The way your child speaks with gentleness because they heard it from you. The way your grandchild prays when they're scared because they saw you do it. The way someone decides to forgive because you modeled what it looked like. The way they treat others with honor, humility, or courage because they watched you quietly live it. That's legacy, not loud, not flashy, but eternal. You are already writing it. Every day, you are writing a legacy whether you realize it or not. With every decision you make, with every word you choose to say or not say. With every moment you stop, look your child in the eye, and choose connection over distraction. These moments seem small, but together they become the invisible foundation your family will stand on long after you're gone. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be faithful. What you leave is bigger than you. One day you won't be here, but your wisdom can remain, your love can remain, your example can remain. And maybe, just maybe, your great-grandchildren will say your name with gratitude even if they never met you. They'll say, "This is how my grandfather handled hard times. This is the prayer my grandmother always said. We do this at dinner because that's how our family's always done it." Tradition, honor, strength, these are the echoes of a life well lived. 3 things that shape a lasting legacy. Consistency. Over time, legacy isn't about one big moment, it's about thousands of small ones done with care. A bedtime blessing, a kind word, a held boundary, a quiet hug, repeat them. Character over reputation. Reputation is what strangers think. Character is what your family remembers. Choose integrity even when no one is watching, especially then. Faithfulness over perfection. You will get it wrong. You will lose your temper. You will miss opportunities, but show up anyway. Keep trying, keep loving. Keep asking for forgiveness and offering it too. That's the legacy people remember, not flawlessness, but faithfulness. A question to ask yourself. When your children look back on your life, what story will they tell? Not the biography, not the facts, but the feeling of your presence, the shape of your love, the sound of your voice when you called them by name. That story is being written right now. Will it be a story of strength, of grace, of wisdom passed down gently like a hand on the shoulder? Only you can decide. Your legacy starts with one choice. The truth is, you don't build a legacy by doing more. You build it by doing what matters more intentionally. So choose the dinner table over the screen. Choose the hard conversation over avoidance. Choose the quiet correction over the loud reaction. Choose the long view over the short win. Choose to plant something they can grow into, because when all is said and done, your life will whisper to the next generation. This is the way. The righteous man walks in integrity. His children are blessed after him. Proverbs 27. That's the kind of legacy the world desperately needs today. Not perfection, but people willing to lead with quiet strength, firm love, and deep roots. And if you've made mistakes, good. It means you've lived. It means you have wisdom, and it means you have something worth passing on before you go. If these words stirred something in you, if they reminded you of the kind of person you want to be, or the kind of home you still hope to build, then please, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Share this message with someone who still believes in the quiet power of family, because the best way to preserve a legacy is to pass it on.